More important is maintaining a constant tone in a movie's development. Often when we see movies, they will either be made to be quiet or loud, serious or tongue-in-cheek, light or heavy, and rarely will the tone shift or waver. And even when it does, it's only slight, and it still retains some of its focus and discipline, as the director knows how to get the best out of their cast, soundtrack and story. And they will often go to great lengths to ensure that the end result does not become too clouded and the overall tone does not shift too much. But what if I was to tell you that is not always the case? I am Chris Hall, and today I bring you Revelation. Revelation is a movie which combines horror, fantasy, drama, religion and comedy all together in one easy-to-swallow capsule. Revelation is a 1999 horror movie which stars Jeff Fahey as Thorold, son of Thorin Stone, whose family mysteriously vanish into a bright light one day, leaving him all on his bill and looking rather glum. He works for ONE, which is an investigation unit dedicated to finding and eliminating those who oppose the Messiah, played by Nick Mancuso, who seems to have only been available for one afternoon, given how little he is in the movie. During an investigation into a bus bombing, Stone's partner is killed by a mysterious man who can special effect his way through walls. Naturally, Stone is blamed for his partner's death, and is on the run, during which time we meet a hacker who cannot hack. He has a poorly dubbed conversation on the beach, and the bad guy's nature is spelled out for all the slow people at the back of the class. Soon he meets Helen Hannah and a ragtag group of resistant fighters, known to the ONE as haters, who want to expose the Messiah for what he really is and save the world from his evil clutches. Will Stone and Co save the day? Will the movie stop having sudden bursts of speed? And will the hacker finally figure out how hacking works? There's only one way to find out. Fight! Revelations is in many regards like those zombie movies that you see, in which the people in it don't know what a zombie is. In this case, it's as though no one knows what the rapture is, or what the Antichrist is. I mean, good grief, I'm an atheist, and I know more about this kind of stuff than the people in this movie. And come to think about it, this movie is set in the United States of America, a traditionally Christian nation, so there must be at least a good, I don't know, couple million people who didn't ascend that could warn everybody about what's going on. I mean, really, did they... You know what? I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here, so let us just focus on the performances. The performances in this movie range from the bland and the wooden to the plain over-the-top, out-and-out scenery-chewing nuttiness. The gulf of these two areas is best illustrated in the scene in which the partner is killed. The partner up to this point has only really spouted exposition about our lead character, and is done with the same level of performative gravitas as somebody ordering their lunch. This character, yes, is a throwaway character who will soon be killed off, but still, he delivers his lines in a way which they feel almost as written on the script, and he delivers them almost as they are read, to a degree in which you worry that he could start reading the stage directions at any moment.
See, Thor, the same thing your wife is talking about. And you know where that got her? Gone, just like the rest of them.
On the flip side to this, you have Mr. Parker, who is this strange, oozing character who gurns out every single line that he delivers with a degree of subtlety matched only by the greatest of pantomime baddies. He bursts out every single line with a sheer amount of bitter venom. It is surprising that he's not poisoned himself.
I understand, sir.
No, I don't think you do.
That things...
Spit it out, man!
No, she's just a child!
Oh, not for long.
Of course, it is somewhat silly of me to focus in on the performances of two side characters, neither of which have that much time in the movie. What about the main cast, I hear you cry? Well, the main cast themselves are solid. There's no words really to describe it. There's no member of the cast who is truly terrible, and there's no one who is truly fantastic. Everyone performs well within the roles in which they are given, but then no one really surprises you. There's no one who surpasses expectations. There's no one that really drops below expectations. Everyone performs solidly, and that's just about it. Our lead character, however, seems to be the best actor out of them. He performs very well with some fairly terrible material and seemingly with some very, very loose directing.
How about it, God? Make a believer out of me! Huh? I guess he's not up to the challenge today, Helen. Looks to me like Macalusso's the only one around here pulling off miracles.
The world that the film creates is interesting in its own little way. It crafts a world which is to some degree believable. Usually when movies focus on the biblical end of the world, it's either people trying to stop it from happening, or it's just it happening and nothing else. We don't see what happens to people after judgment, after the rapture, and this movie does create a fairly believable world of it. And there's no aspect of it that feels terribly clumsy or mishandled, even if the name of a certain news station within it just feel a bit groansome. What happens elsewhere in the world is illustrated to us via news broadcasts and radio discussions. There's nothing in it that feels laboured or melodramatic, and the storyline itself, well, what happens at the end of it doesn't magically resolve all the world's problems, and opens its way to some regards to a sequel of some kind, even if it really doesn't deserve one. Though with that said, the film's story itself is terribly run-of-the-mill. It's about a hard-nosed cop who, through personal grievances, has lost his belief in God. And over the course of the movie, those beliefs will be challenged and he will become a believer by the end of it. In originality, it's nothing new, least of all in this genre of fiction. But still, this is a narrative-driven piece. It's more of a narrative-driven piece than, say, a character study. And in that regard, having a run-of-the-mill story really isn't good enough. Well, at least I hope it's narrative-driven and narrative-focused. Because if this is focused on the quality of the acting, good grief, we're in for a headache.
You're not burning. It's him. He's protecting them.
It came without ribbons. It came without tags.
Turn it up more. No! Can't do this. He can't do this!
It came without packages, boxes, or bags.
Finish them myself.
Okay, so I think it's fair to say that the film isn't about the brilliant quality of the acting within the movie. So, yes, it must be narrative focused, yes. And, well, if that is the case, then it must make for a really compelling story, mustn't it? How is that? Well, it's a little uncompelling. How uncompelling? Well, I present to you Exhibit A. Yes, my DS. About midway through the movie, I nonchalantly just opened it up, switched it on, and started playing it for about 5 minutes, maybe less. And it was only then that I suddenly realised, oh bugger, I should really be reviewing this movie. I switched it off and I put it back to one side. And I missed absolutely nothing from the film itself. Now, of course, me going back and watching this movie on subsequent occasions has made me appreciate the story a little bit more and find it a little bit more interesting. Though with that said, it's really, really inexcusable.
If I had one of these, I'd never leave the house.
And to make matters worse, this is the first time that I've ever done this with any of the movies I've reviewed thus far. Did I do it when I was watching Cars Life? No. Over the Top, Bela Lugosi meets a Brooklyn Gorilla, I'm Still Waiting for You? No. What about the 3 movies I've lined up to review next?
This is amazing.
Jokes aside, this is a horrible, terrible problem. And yes, I did find the movie more interesting upon repeat viewings. But the only reason I've actually gone back to watch this movie is because I've been doing this review. I otherwise wouldn't have gone back to it. So if you yourself decide after this to watch it, chances are you'll get bored and you'll think to yourself, well, that Chris character was wrong, it's not compelling in the slightest, which it isn't upon first viewing. Repeat viewings, it's okay, but that isn't good enough, quite frankly. And by the looks of things, the filmmakers themselves knew that the movie cannot be that compelling at times. So instead of, say, making a film with a good pace and making it with a compelling story, instead they decided to have frantic jumps forward and sudden bursts of speed.
Do you hear something?
I didn't hear anything.
What do you see?
It's a piece of junk.
Stuff like this you can kind of forgive slightly because of just how odd some of these jumps can be. Though with relationships, you really can't forgive it.
We got some leftover salad if you're hungry.
Within a few seconds of these two characters meeting, it is love at first sight, or as close to love at first sight as you can get with someone who is blind. But still, these two characters have no prior history with one another whatsoever, so as far as we, the audience, are concerned, they are meeting for the first time, and already they're practically planning their life together.
I'm vegetarian because I hate plants.
Yeah, well, I didn't work my way to the top of the food chain to sit around chewing on a cucumber.
Oh, well, that explains a lot. Vegetables are brain food.
Ooh. She's not only gorgeous, but she's rude and sarcastic, too.
All the time that they have together is just comprised of some very short, very sharp scenes in which they have a little bit of banter, then suddenly they're wanting to bump uglies. I mean, good grief! The relationship is moving so fast, it's as though they're on some kind of speed dating game.
It's time for Blind Date! On tonight's show, he's a computer programmer and she's a lady. Will they get on? Let's find
I'm
out.
vegetarian.
Yeah, well, if God didn't want us to eat animals, he shouldn't have made them out of meat. I wish I just had the same old program in here I already had.
Why?
Then maybe I'd get to take a peek at you in a bikini.
For heaven's sake.
Talk about your day of wonders, huh? Ruff!
Terrible.
Where have you been all my life?
Well,
And when I did say that it is sometimes forgivable when you have some of these jumps because they can be hilariously, inadvertently, ironically funny, they can also be incredibly dumb. I mean, horribly, incredibly dumb. The best example, and the one that sticks out in my mind the sharpest, is when the blind lady suddenly decides to go into the virtual world for no apparent reason.
Welcome to the Day of Wonders.
Willie.
There is a good side to this sudden moment of stupidity, as the scene that we do then get in the virtual world, I think, is great. And it stands out as one of being the finer moments within the movie, as we get to see the Messiah for what he truly is. We get to see him as this great, powerful, devilish manipulator for the first time. His true nature has kind of been fondled with and flirted with by the story itself, but now we can see without a shadow of a doubt that this guy not only is the bad guy, but could quite possibly be the devil himself. And while some people may scoff and say, it's obviously they didn't have the budget to show what she was seeing, ask yourself this question. How are the makers of this movie supposed to illustrate that a blind woman can see? How are we supposed to perform that? How are we supposed to stage that? How are we supposed to do this in a way which shows the bad guy for being this truly powerful, manipulative bad guy? How are we supposed to do this in a way that doesn't feel silly and over the top and poorly put together? Sure, some of the physical actions in this scene may look incredibly hokey. Sure, our lead actress in this scene may do the, oh, I can see movements, but they're doing it in a way which is infinitely more subtle and well measured than anything else in this movie. This key to this scene is not her getting the ability to see. The key aspect to this scene is us, the audience, seeing our bad guy for the first time as being the true bad guy to this movie. It is about us seeing the bad guy and getting an idea as to how he got into the position that he's in now. He didn't become the almighty ruler of the world by zapping fire at his fingertips. He did it through manipulation and warping people's perception of the world.
Yes!
And for the most part, Mercutio's performance in this movie is great. For the most part. Until this happens.
Not even your God can save you.
He already is.
Yes, in one fell swoop, all the skill and all the measurement that you've shown during your entire time on the screen has been burnt away through one facial expression. And for what exactly? Up to this moment, you've managed to create this character that is believable, that I myself can believe being the devil here. But now you've ruined it and thrown it all away. We take ourselves from something that is measured and well controlled into Ooga Booga land. What were you thinking? I mean, good God, the scene that we've had in the virtual world, forget that, you've blown that away by ruining it. Now whenever I go back to watch this movie, as I've done several times over, I don't see this clever, devilish manipulator anymore. All I see is this. I mean, yes, his performance wasn't good enough to carry the movie. No performance is good enough to carry a movie, despite what the people that have been hiring Johnny Depp for the past 5 years may think. But still, that is something you can put a line under and say, yes, this movie has terrible pacing. Pacing so terrible, it makes it look as though the movie was created by someone with ADD. Sure, the soundtrack is abysmal and terrible and adds nothing to the movie. Sure, the acting can be wooden and unbelievably campy at times, but at least we have a great bad guy. But now you can't even say that! And you know what the great irony of this is? Is that the first time I saw his performance in this, it was so strangely bewitching that I overlooked all the problems and all the flaws within his physical performance. I mean, really, his physical performance is so flowing and dynamic, or at least it would be, were it not so bound back and constricted. He convulses around the screen like a T-Rex with constipation. He looks for all the world as though he should be in some kind of 1920s cartoon, like Flip the No! And his and Stone's performances in this scene, much like the performances between Mr. Parker and the partner, the soundtrack, the editing, and the way the film itself is put together, has this strange juxtaposition in it between the underplayed and the overplayed, the realistic and the epic, the quiet and the loud. And here you have two performance approaches which are clashed together so tightly that it shows the qualities and limitations of each one of the performances. Before, the Messiah only looked silly and campy. Now he looks out and out daft. And prior to this, our lead was cool and measured. Now he looks extra mumbly to the point of being wooden. Neither has suddenly gotten any worse. And when they separate, the prior status quo is re-established and they go back to being some way good. But the fact they're on screen together makes them cancel each other out. They're both good at what they do individually, but together it's like oil and water, chalk and cheese, Lancashire and Yorkshire. These two performers shouldn't be together performing the way that they do without them performing to the same level. They either both have to be over the top and silly or both measured, otherwise it just looks plain odd. And this shows a great lack of directorial rigour and discipline on behalf of our director. And it is present in almost every single aspect of this movie. You either go all out and have something that is gritty and realistic, or have something that is fantastical and absurd. You can't do both. Not that the director would have wanted to have these clashes, but no one would look at this movie in their right mind and say, my God, look at these brilliant juxtapositions. No, they'd look at it and say, my God, this film clashes together so much, it's like watching a car crash.
Do I need it?
And you can't even make the claim that this is Verfundens effect, as that would imply there's more to this movie other than the devil is bad, okay. Look, I'm sorry, this is going a little bit too deep and going to a level of depth that this really doesn't deserve. And I'm sorry for getting so angry earlier on. It's just that it's really easy to just turn around and say this movie is bad. Because, well, it is bad. But movies are bad for very specific reasons, and I like to explain as to why that is the case. I like to go deeper. So the big question, can I recommend it? No. The movie is a mess, as it comes in two conflicting approaches which are present in all areas of the film, which will either drown the movie in silliness or starve it of substance. There are some really great elements in the movie. The world is solid and believable, and the lead can be good when he wants to be. However, this is all in service of a movie which lacks a constant pace and is littered with terrible performances, and has a story that really does nothing substantial enough to live up to the promise and the creativity of the world that it creates. But as a whole package, it can make for a rather serviceable, if incredibly disposable B-movie, and it can be interesting now and again, but it lacks in any real kick or flavour that will make it truly memorable or something that I can honestly and wholeheartedly recommend. Some people may get sniffy at the fact that this is a movie about religion and faith, and if you're that kind of person, see it as a horror fantasy. I mean, you don't need to believe in the holy divinity of Legolas to like the Lord of the Rings movies, and if you still have an issue with it being religious with that in mind, well, you can always grow up. This is not a movie that you can just sit back and laugh at. This isn't a so bad it's good movie, and it's not really a so good it's good movie. It is distinctly average. Though with that said, if you are interested in watching it, you may well find it enjoyable. I have found it more interesting going back to view it multiple times, and it's only really terrible once you start to get into the finer workings of the film's DNA. Now, since recording this review, I have learnt that this movie is part of a series of films, which I am sure are wonderful and brilliant and fun for all the family. I probably will not watch any of them unless they are available in the pound shop or at a car boot sale. That's where I got my copy of this from. Now, if you will excuse me, I am going to take some medication because I've been talking about religion for far too long and it's starting to hurt my atheist sensibilities. Goodbye.